We're going to start with Ava. We're talking about organic reach, and I asked a few people, what do you think about organic reach? And I got a few blank stares. So we're going to open with Ava talking a little bit about what organic reach is and what maybe some of the challenges have been with organic reach over the past, I don't know, few years.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Ava, and I'm with Hootsuite, and I'll be on stage a little bit later. Organic reach really is what it sounds like. It's how many people is your content being reaching without any paid performance behind it. How many people are seeing your content through unpaid methods? And so obviously this could be through a number of different channels, whether it's digital, whether it's through PR, for example, blog and SEO. And this is a really interesting point because we've seen a decline in organic reach, which is obviously what we'll talk about a lot today. And there's a number of reasons for it. And two particular reasons that I always think first of would be if we think about how many of us are probably all on social media in one form or another, what are we doing? We're either creating content or we are consuming content. And as content creation has grown phenomenally, it just means that you can't see everything that everyone is creating in your network. And similarly, as a business, not everyone is going to see your content either. So the networks have taken action to say, what content matters most to you? And that's what we'll show you. So businesses have a lot of work to add value for their users and their audiences in order to get their content shown to them. So that's kind of my opening salvo.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm going to turn to the rest of the panel as well, because when we think of organic reach, we often think of social media and the organic reach that I get just by posting something and people see it. But there's a lot of organic channels. Just shout them out. What organic channels do you guys think of?
By the way, my name's Carly. Lacey Sheridan wasn't available today, so she sent me. I'm Carly Russell Huntley, the community manager at use.ca. We found a lot of success actually with newsletters and emails. I've been with the company for 9 years. I remember when we first started, it was all about social media. And then we realized the best way to reach our customers was direct email because they actually gave us their email address, which means they wanted to hear from us. So we did that through Enter to Win contesting, blog posting, encouraging people to sign up, and we just found that direct marketing, we found great success because didn't have to pay for it. It was just right there.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Micheal. At Maximizer, probably our most important organic channels are still organic search, which is through SEO, what people commonly call SEO. It still accounts for about 35 to 40% of all of our traffic and leads. But it is shrinking, and it's shrinking for various factors. Part of it is Google and just the way they're presenting results on the search result pages. And so we do look at other areas, email being one. That's also been impacted in the last couple of years with GDPR and other privacy issues that have limited who we can approach and who we can reach out to. But lately for us, the growing area is review sites and what I would call digital word of mouth, and people talking about you on different platforms that is unsolicited, uncontrollable for the most part. But we're going to talk about review sites a little bit later on, but that's another organic channel that's really important to us.
Awesome. Sean?
Yeah, I think, to oversimplify, picking up off Ava, it's, there's paid and there's owned, but I would sort of unpack owned, and maybe it's semantics, but Caroline yesterday said, Instagram's an owned channel. Well, you're still paying for that audience to some degree. And so I think you can highlight channels like email where you are not at the mercy of, ad tech. And then also think about channels that may seem less traditional, so Quora, Reddit, review sites and stuff like that. So again, depends on the category and the industry and the purpose of what you're trying to accomplish. But I think organic and paid are a hot topic because it's changing all the time. So,
awesome. And just to prove that I can use Google too, I made a list, and I'm just going to read them off here, and then I'm going to ask the panel, how do you prioritize which organic channels to use? So I looked at all the organic channels I could think of. Social is obviously there, and there's 50 million social networks, well, maybe 5 that matter, right? And different ways of doing that via personal or pages or corporate accounts. Review rating sites, and Yelp is there, Google's there, TripAdvisor, many others as well. You talked about review sites as well, so you're looking at Trust Radius, G2 Crowd, other things like that, right? There's search, right? There's web, slash blogging. There's email, newsletter, we mentioned that. There's apps. If you can get people to download your app, that's an organic channel. There's SMS. If you have phone numbers and people have opted into SMS, that's an organic channel. That's interesting, and because that gets right to, that has almost a 99% view rate. It's pretty impressive. There's PR. There's bylines. So you've got some expertise, you do a byline somewhere, that's organic. Word of mouth, somebody mentioned, there's a podcast. You don't like writing, you don't want to do a website, you don't want to do a blog. Maybe you're an expert in something, you like talking to people, record it. You got a podcast, boom. White papers, you've got some expertise. Signage on your physical location. Packaging, what's your packaging look like, right? Hold music. You shouldn't put somebody on hold maybe in the first place, but if you have them there, well then you've got something. Speaking at an event, right? Hosting events. Okay, so there's a ton of channels and I haven't mentioned them all. You're a small or medium-sized business, maybe you got 20 people, maybe you got 5, maybe you got 50. You can't do everything. How do you prioritize? Throw into the panel.
Sure.
Ava wants it.
It really comes down to how well do you know your audience and what are they looking for and where are they going to be. So we regardless of the channel, ultimately the important thing is how are you adding value for them. So what content can you give them to make their lives better, to help them do their jobs better, to give them the products that they need. And when you know what they're looking for and where they are, that will help you understand how do you prioritize which channels are most effective. And so we would never advocate for anyone to be in every channel everywhere. You'd spread yourself so thin and it would become potentially ineffective. So understanding your audience as well as you can and then understanding what they're looking for in those spaces will help you also create a content strategy. So you're adding value in different places. It wouldn't be super helpful if you're publishing the same content across all of these organic channels. There's less incentive to be in all of those places as a result. So it comes down into easy statements would be know your audience, whatever you can do to learn everything about them, and then prioritize where are they and what are they looking for to help determine what you create for them.
Cool, it's a great answer. It's almost like saying no is almost as important as saying yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Sean, I want to turn it to you. We, as business owners, we all want this sort of fantasy world where we put something out and everybody loves it, everybody shares it, everybody likes it, and millions of people see it, and business rolls through the door so fast we can't, take it all. That doesn't always happen, shockingly. How do you maximize organic reach?
Yeah, I think what Ava was saying, know your audience, know your channel, know your audience, know your content, and importantly, use data to substantiate your thinking there. Don't just assume. There's a lot of data available. So we're talking about search and organic, so look at long tail results periodically, formally, understand sort of what people are actually searching for, not just sort of the key branded terms you're perhaps buying. And same with social, you can look sort of competitively and quantitatively, like what's performing within that sort of segment or within that audience. So I would start at a macro view, like understanding what to create and why, using data. If you're not using data, you're lucky or you're wrong, right? So that's a terrible place to start. The other thing is when you start to produce content and you see them coming in the door, then you can again measure and understand and corroborate behavior, and then you can start to double down, optimize, and sort of improve the content you're creating. So it's not necessarily a finite thing. You can evolve it.
Let's unpack that a little bit. How do you start using data if you don't have any data right now?
How much time do you got? We can talk. So, no, I'll keep it succinct. I think it's actually a lot more available than you think, and it's a lot more easier than you think. Even just Google with Google Trends and Google Keyword Planner. There's lots of tools like SEMrush and Moz that allow you to gather data, especially on the search side. I think that's quite important. Same with social. There's tons of tools, and through Hootsuite as well, that you can start to understand what's working and why. So without sort of going too deep on this, I would say start to investigate the tools and Google things that may be available to help you sort of plan and inform your creative thinking, if that makes sense.
Cool, interesting. So what you're suggesting is even if you don't have data on your own things, use Google Trends or something like that, find out what's trending, what's important, what's working, what people are searching for, what they're not searching for, and tailor your content to that. See what podcasts are super successful, see what people are listening to, and then I guess put that together with Ava's comment about your audience and where they might be. Let's turn to somebody else, maybe Carly, maybe Michael, and just say, hey, what happens? You start. Maybe you start a blog, maybe you start a podcast, and it's just not resonating. What do you do?
Well, I think the key, as Sean had said about data, is first thing is to understand who your customer is. And don't make assumptions of who your customer is based on your own beliefs. And I'll give you an example. I've been with Maximizer just over a year. And when I joined Maximizer, there was this very clear set of personas that had been developed, and that was who we were marketing to. And all the marketing was directed at this one specific vertical. It didn't take long for me to realize that that's not who our customer is. Excuse me. And since Ian Black, who spoke yesterday, came on board as our CEO, we are completely shifting direction, because who we thought was buying our software and who we were targeting our marketing to, especially our organic and our content, is not who was buying our software. And so our content is now in flux. That's the best way to put it. We're completely changing our direction and our messaging to go after who we know is buying our software, and it's not who we thought. And so the key is using data, but before you start massing data and looking at all the numbers, understand who the market is that you're trying to reach, and who is actually buying your products, or who you think is going to buy your product may not be the reality.
Michael, can you just briefly go a little deeper there? How do you not know who's buying your software? How did that happen?
Lack of use of data. Believe it or not, and this is embarrassing to admit this, we are a CRM company.
Hey, it's a real world.
But
Real
it's
boats
the real
rock.
world. The company went through several different marketing people, and they each brought different backgrounds, and they weren't looking at the reality of the data that was available. We're a CRM company. We know exactly who's buying our product, but you have to look. And the data's there if you know how to find it and have the interest in looking. And it didn't take very long. All I had to do was start looking at the leads and the type of companies that were submitting leads, and realize there's a complete disconnect with the messaging and all the ads that were running on Google. And so I started turning the ads around and putting new ads up, and suddenly our lead flow started to double and triple. So
10 points to Michael for honesty. Awesome. He's leading, everybody. He's leading. He's leading. Anybody else who's ever screwed up? Yeah, I'm on the list. Good. Carly, any thoughts there?
Yeah, so my role at Use.ca is community manager, so I'm usually out on the ground talking to actual people. So I think if you're going to start something like a podcast or a blog, it's really important to connect with your customers, with your users, and find out, kind of similar to what you said with data, actually talk to them in person when you're on site somewhere, or you're at an event, or in your store, and say, what are you looking for? Even, show them what you're doing, saying, is this something that's interesting? It would be of interest to you, because I think one thing that's missing sometimes with the idea of social media is it's still social.
The social
and
part.
we need to talk to people. It was funny when my boss mentioned, she's like, do you want to do this panel? It's organic reach. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure. She's like, nothing's more organic than what you do. You literally just go around and talk to people all day long at various events. And I said, oh yeah, I guess that's right. Even though it's not digital, it's still connecting with people. I think that's really important, and that can help boost your social.
That's really awesome. I mean, sometimes it's really scary to talk to people, right? But yeah, it's okay. I want to turn to Ava. And so let's say we start something and we start doing something. Maybe it's a blog, maybe it's a podcast, maybe whatever it is that you're doing with organic reach. Maybe it's email newsletter, real simple to existing customers. But maybe it's something on social as well. And maybe it's something that you're posting to social after you do it. And you're seeing some traction with it. You're seeing some success. Is it a good idea to support that with a little bit of paid? How do you do that? How do you know when to do that? And what's the right way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, the short story would be that it would vary. I think even before you would maybe launch, let's say, a podcast or a blog, and ultimately, hopefully you are seeing traction, it would be critical as a very first step to understand what's the point of it. Like, what is the purpose of you creating the content? Because that will then set up the whole series of steps to say, okay, if this is what I want to achieve in order to support my business, I'm going to create this content, this is the data I have on my audience, and then this is the measurement framework I'm going to put in place so I know what I'm looking for when it comes to data, and what does success look like based on the problem I'm solving. And then if you're starting to see traction based on the problem that you've defined that you want to solve, then you could look at paid as an alternative way to boost it. And there's a few different ways that you can do this, and I think a lot of us think about ads first and foremost, but The kind of softer side of that would be what we call boosting, which is to take what's performing well organically and then use a little bit of budget behind it to just accelerate the success that you're seeing. And the beautiful part about that is it kind of plays into how, and I'm going to speak specifically to social media in this example, but when you would boost a post that might be performing well organically, you have what we like to call a bit of social proof behind it. You've got people who are resonating with it that then others will see. And so when you can put dollars behind it, you can then target the exact people you want to reach. So with organic reach, what you have to consider is that the people you reach organically might not be your target audience. They're people who follow you, they may be your fans, word of mouth have contributed to that. But if you really want to reach the specific person who might buy the product, this is where boosting or ad dollars and spending on digital marketing in general can actually help you reach the right person at the right time, and also help you grow an audience that then is your target audience. So there's kind of multiple layers to it, and it first and foremost comes back to what are you looking to achieve? What are you going to attempt to do to try and reach those people? And then if it's performing well organically, boosting it is actually extremely effective and very cost effective for a small business, and I would highly recommend that approach over straight ads in the beginning. But on either way, whether you were to do straight ads or boosting, A/B testing is a really valuable way to gather data. You can benchmark against yourself if you don't have data like up front. It's quite difficult sometimes outside of what you can see organically to know what's performing well for others. But with your own data, if you don't know where to start, have a few versions, change one thing, and then see which resonates with your audience, and then you can build off of that learning. So an example of what we did organically to learn more about our audience from content was we looked at our networks and we created posts in different tones of voice. One of which was humor, one of which was value-based, like what are you going to learn from this content directly, and one of which we called FOMO, which is like, ooh, if people feel like they're missing out, are they going to want to click this? Not clickbait, but close. And we found that each network really resonated with a different approach. And so LinkedIn was like fully FOMO-based. People were like, oh my God, my competitors know more than me, or my colleagues know more than me. And what worked on Twitter was like all about what they learned, and Facebook was all about humor. And so even that in itself helped us better target the content to the right audience. But hopefully this wasn't a convoluted answer, but there are layers to think about. And if you get those pieces in place, it makes it really straightforward, and you know that you're not wasting your time testing multiple things. So, yes.
That was a long answer, but it was a very good answer. It was a very good answer. It was well worth the time. And I want to underline something there, actually, because multiple people on the panel have talked about getting data. What Ava's talking about is free data. You're posting on your own social. You're seeing what the organic, free results are from that. People are liking it, people are not liking it, whatever. And then you're boosting the one that works. You're already backing a winner when you're putting money behind it. That's really smart. We'll get to questions in a little bit, so please hold that. That'd be awesome. The other thing that I would mention, because you mentioned it was a long answer, and it is a long answer, that's okay. They are videoing these sessions, and you can come back to them. They will be posted, apparently. I asked, they will be posted on the website or some way, shape, or form. You'll be able to get back to them. That's really important. You remember the woman yesterday who was talking about A&W and all that stuff? Julie Wise, right? From Visium or something like that. A lot of detail there. I would go back and rewatch that one 4 or 5 times. Anyways, let's move on. Micheal, I'm going to direct the next one to you. And we're talking about organic, whether it's social, whether it's other things. I want to talk about your existing customer base. How can your existing customer base help you?
Goldmine of information, both on how they're using, how they're using the product, are they happy with the product, and then leveraging those customers to be your advocates, to evangelize your product. This is where, again, review sites come in. We run campaigns where we just reach out to customers that we have had positive contact with, usually through our customer support department. And we know that they're happy, and we say, great, would you like to post a review? Not a lot of people will do it because it's time consuming, but we do get reviews posted. The other thing we've just started to do is if you go to our website and go to our case studies or success stories section, we've started doing interviews through Skype and video interviews and video case studies with some of our best clients. And some of these clients have been using Maximizer for 20, 25 years. Great collection and great assortment. We just did one with Boating World. Boating World is in Cape Town, South Africa. They're one of the largest luxury yacht dealers in all of Africa, and they sell all through the Mediterranean. And he did an awesome interview with us just via Skype, and it's now a full case study on our website. We didn't incentivize him. We didn't pay him for this. So there's all of this knowledge and great goodwill out there if you've got customers that like you, and you just need to ask. And don't be scared to ask. And if they say no, they say no.
Super interesting. Awesome. Carly, I want to turn to you. We've listed a whackload of organic channels. We've talked about some of them. We've gone deep into them. I want to ask you about organic channels that maybe people don't think about, that don't come first to mind, but that can be really effective. What have you seen there?
Well, firstly, kind of going back to what I said, like, being face-to-face with people, creating connections that way. Part of that, I think, is making connections with people similar in your field, especially on social. If you actually meet somebody in person and then maybe tag them on a social post later on with something that you both have in common, there's a pretty good chance they're probably going to share it more than just someone you just randomly tag and hope for the best. So I think personal connection is really key. Another thing too is, I think it was touched on yesterday about looking at what you own and leveraging that. So to give an example, at use.ca, we're digital advertising, or a digital site, and we have digital advertising. So we leverage that and trade that in kind for sponsorships. So last year we sponsored over 200 events, and we, by the way, have a $0 marketing budget. We have no budget at all. And through that, we gained $900,000 in free marketing at various events. So even though you don't have a digital site to trade with, you might have products. Look for activations in the community where you can trade what you have in order to get that branding out in the community. And I think as well, too, another thing that's missed sometimes is showing your love for your local community. So look for charities. Look for ways you can give back and then social that or share that. I think a lot of people feel that if a company is giving back, they're going to support it more. So I think that's just a great way to find other ways to reach out to the community.
Any others on the panel on maybe hidden or not so well-known organic channels?
Yeah, I guess I'll sort of answer it a different way, which is you can look at data from one channel and apply it to another. So MEC, MEC, we do a lot of work with them, and so we're looking at like Kijiji, like what are people buying and selling? That can inform something they put on their Learn or their blog section. We're looking at data from Instagram, like what are the top sort of campsites that are being tagged and posted? Okay, that can help inform what they're doing in other areas. So I think looking in less traditional areas or channels, and then helping them understand how that can play a role in their creative planning across other channels is helpful. Yep.
Awesome. Go ahead, Eva.
One other kind of interesting organic one on the flip side of customer advocacy that we use a lot is our employees and employee advocacy. So we provide them with a lot of content that they can share to their networks organically, and the reach is impressive. I think if you think about just compounding kind of like audiences, so I'll just be transparent with the numbers, but when we did an announcement, let's say for a LinkedIn integration, we did it on LinkedIn, and we got maybe a few 100,000 impressions organically through our company channel. But when we gave the content to our employees to share, we saw 10 times the reach through them because they have multiple networks that we're then getting exposure to through them. So that's actually another channel that we leverage as much as we possibly can.
That's a super smart idea. I was talking to the CMO of Branch Metrics out of San Francisco about half a year ago, and she was saying something similar to that. And she was saying when our employees share something, we get 10x the views, the clicks, the conversions, all the other stuff. What she did say is that we do that once a week. So we have, from our corporate social accounts, we might share something, I don't know, on LinkedIn, maybe 5 times or 7 times or 10 times in the week. Once a week, we'll send something around to our clients and to our employees, our staff, our team, and ask them to share. So we don't overburden them, and that works really, really well. Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, we have like a pool of content that employees can actually pick and choose what they want to share, and then if there's something really major, we might push a notification to them and ask them to participate. But it's very like opt-in as well, so we're not forcing them. It's not like obligatory. Yeah.
Good call. Okay, tough one here. There are more honesty points to be awarded, by the way, from the panel. Worst organic media, worst channels. Worst organic channels that you've tried and just didn't work. Ooh, we got something
okay,
to take.
I'm gonna skirt the question, but I think a channel that I think is not done well, yet everybody does it and they put a ton of work into it, but it's still no one's really winning is email. Right? Like everybody has email, everybody sends emails, we don't spend enough time thinking like what actually people want in their inbox in some cases. And so I'm like totally not answering your question, so I'll probably get negative points. But my comment is, as an organic and owned channel, we should be putting more time and attention to email because you own it. You don't pay to rent that audience, that's yours to own. And of course, it helps with loyalty and advocacy and your existing customers, but I'd say email is like it's a real wasteland, you know?
5 points for that one. No worries. You're not negative. Nobody's negative. We're all positive here. Ava's going to be bold.
I think that the channel that scares me the most is Reddit. It's like kind of on a personal level.
Who here is on Reddit, knows Reddit?
It can be a really dark place. So if you're going there, especially as a brand, people are not open to marketing messages on there. So that's like one where we might not be using it as effectively as we can, but you can be kind of smart collecting the pulse of conversations. I think it's one of the best channels for honest two-way conversation and people trying to debunk, especially what we call fake news, etc. But yeah, that's the channel that I think has so much potential, but it's extremely difficult to leverage as a brand.
Reddit is wild. It can take off, and sometimes that's amazing, and sometimes it burns your whole world down.
Yeah, like we used to, in a former role at a media company, we used to try and seed articles in the relevant subreddits, and we'd see massive spikes in traffic, but eventually it would lose momentum, and then we'd have to kind of start over. So we did try and utilize it, but it was very difficult and not necessarily like high quality results too. So yeah, sometimes it's more about quality than quantity.
Cool. Anybody else on that topic, or can I move to the next one?
I would quickly say, probably just with experience, and some people might hate me for saying this, but Facebook can be difficult to navigate. I think a lot of us has heard the whole pay to play and focus on Facebook a lot with that. So kind of going back to what they were saying about data, so that's really key, is when you do a post, look and see how it resonated with people. And then I agree with the boosting on Facebook. That is nice. Kind of Facebook's a double-edged sword. It's like it's really got some great ways to pinpoint your demographic, but at the same time, it seems to bury you a lot unless you give them a little bit of money. So that's just kind of my feedback with them.
It's a good point. If Facebook ever announces or releases something new, jump on it right away. First few people, first few months or whatever, you'll get great results. And then all of a sudden the dial will turn down. And somehow dollars will have to be inserted into the machine in order to replicate those good results over time. I don't know. Somebody's invented that. It's an amazing solution. Cool. I'm going to turn to Ava for the next one and ask a little bit about measurement. So we were listening to Koetsier yesterday talking about word of mouth, and he must have freaking amazing word of mouth. I mean, I checked out the website, like $150 for a pair of shorts. Holy mother! But hey, something's working. Excellent, good for him. But we want to measure that. We want to see what's going on social media. We want to be able to measure that. How do we measure?
It's quite difficult to measure holistically across the board, across channels. The way that data is collected and presented by the networks seems to slightly vary as to, when you're picking the metrics, and I'll talk a lot more about this later this morning, but when you're picking the metrics that are right for what you're trying to achieve and learn from, make sure that you fully understand how they define it for one. I guess one of the tips that I would have around the best way to try and collect as much data as you can that's relevant is the way that you set up the measurement framework in advance. So if you know your goal, what you want to measure, and then how do you track it? And so one of the things that we always do consistently is we attach tags to every URL we put out into the world, so that if it's coming from any kind of website, we can start to see what channel it came from, what campaign it might have been connected to, what type of content it was, and that has been critical to having a successful content strategy for us. So because people are creating a lot of content, let's say on a review site, it's quite difficult to not look at a tool like BrandWatch maybe that helps us collect a lot more of that data across the whole web, or TalkWalker is another partner we work with. But there are ways that you can set up a framework to track data and make sure that you're collecting as much visibility into that as you can into places like Google Analytics and Facebook Pixel, etc. But on the flip side, you can use tools to help try and understand how much are people talking about me. And they've got really cool ways of even using logo recognition and images to say, oh, you're actually being referenced in this post that doesn't mention you, and here's like what people are saying about you and the sentiment behind it and what you can learn from it. So it can get complex quickly, but it's pretty phenomenal what you can learn. But it does take preparation, setting it up in advance, and making sure that you know what you're looking for, because there is so much data out there.
Yeah, it can be challenging. One thing I've learned is that creative people love tagging. They love to tag everything and all the time and look at the analytics. And I'm joking. Creative people hate tagging. I hate tagging as well, but it's all good. No worries. I'm going to ask one more question to the panel, and then I have a million more questions. But I also want to allow time for questions from the audience. So get your question ready. We're going to turn to you after this next question. And if you don't have questions, then I've got more, so it's all good. So, Sean, we're turning to you. And we're talking about organic. Yeah, we're turning to you. Yeah, you're on. Wake up.
Pressure's on. What's the score? What's the score right now?
The score, I don't know. Michael's still in the lead, but okay. It's pretty tight.
I got this.
Yeah, the problem is I'm keeping score in my head, so it can change.
Sure.
It's all good. So we're talking about organic reach and social, other ways of doing organic marketing, organic channels. It seems to involve a lot of content. How do you get enough time? How much content do you have to create? And how do you get enough time to actually create it all?
Good question. So I think, you're talking about no marketing spend, or we label it as like no working spend. So you're not paying money for media, you're producing content or your efforts internally. And so back in the day, you'd spend 80% on working spend, paid media, 20% on the actual content that's being sort of broadcast through that. That's changing, as you're mentioning. So the non-working spend is going up. You're spending a lot more time creating content, especially if you're segmenting and you're trying to make it more tailored to your audiences. So I think you need to just know that and afford yourself time and start to plan for that. But it's not an either or. You have to think about content and paid. And so where I'm going with all of this is, you used to buy the media and then fill it with creative. And now you create really good content and you put bucks around it and you start to promote it. So in thinking of it that way, you can start to get more effective in terms of how you allocate your time and manage your time. But the convergence of all this media just means you have to be smarter around what you're creating and why, and then thinking around how you can take a small amount of money and sort of promote it, because these are like increasingly pay-to-play channels. And so I'd say at the outset, you should be, I don't know, this is like, I'm gonna oversimplify this, but like 50% of your time is like creating content, thinking about what you should create. 50% is around like targeting, optimizing, looking at data, that kind of stuff.
Cool. One thing I'll add there, just from personal experience, is sweating the assets. So I have to do interviews for stories. And I decided that where the person I'm interviewing is comfortable with, I'm doing that on live social. So I use a technology called StreamYard, and I stream my actual interview for a Forbes article on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and on YouTube. And all of a sudden, I've got 4 social assets right there that I would never have had before. Then I write the story. Then I embed the YouTube video in the story. Then I extract the audio from the video, and that goes on the podcast. And then I link to the Forbes story from my own website. And there's many quotes that I can pull out and use on Twitter or LinkedIn or other things like that as well. So what used to be one asset, a story that's posted on Forbes, is probably 25, something like that. So there is more time involved in that to some degree, but it's the same asset, and I'm using it many times over, and I'm exposing what I'm talking about and whoever I'm talking to way more people. So it's actually working out really, really well. I'm enjoying it a lot.
Yeah, and I think a term we use all the time is evergreen. So you want to create assets that could be repurposed in perpetuity through the calendar year. So you don't need to create net new content or assets all the time. You can think about what your customer wants sort of in a more permanent sense and then create it. And you can like re-promote it lots of times. Best practice, don't re-promote. I call bullshit on that. I think you could post something at 9 a.m., post it again at 5 p.m. If your same audience sees it, they'll skip it. If it's a new audience, bingo, you've got them. But it's one asset, and you're using it many times. So I think evergreen is important, and reducing the urge to like just create new content for sort of the sake of producing content.
Cool. Plus 2 points.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. We specifically run an evergreen campaign, especially on Twitter. And what we noticed when we did a review of all of the data that we had from last year's campaigns was that 80% of our results came from 20% of the content. So then we were like, ooh, okay, we're gonna keep those pieces and then we'll sunset the rest for now and then we'll build on that. And then we feed the data back to other teams. But the kind of to add to the content creation piece, because it does take time, would be to make sure you balance it with a lot of content you can find in places that matters to your audience. Like pull in the customer reviews, the user-generated content, find relatable partners and share their content and start to build the relationship so that you can gain access to their audience and they can gain access to yours. And you can fill in the content calendar with pieces of content that you can find that matter around the content you create, because obviously it takes time. So it's also nice to not just talk about yourself, but talk about how people might be using, like tell the stories of others that support your business as well. So you can find pieces of content that people have created almost for you, like customer stories is a great example. And then you can repurpose it in multiple ways.
Awesome, excellent, cool. So like I said, I have more questions, but I know that you've got some questions as well, and there was one right there. We might have a mic runner, and we do sort of have the CEO of stepping up to grab a mic.
I'm gonna steal a mic from you guys.
Oh, and they've shared it so nicely too.
Okay, where
Now
was
they're
it?
getting negatively
Question?
rewarded. Excellent, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for your comments today. The question is around boosting posts. So I spoke to multiple digital media companies, and they, without me even asking this question, they said, do not spend any money on boosting posts. It is a waste of money, and only create ads. And they were like, this is our big tip for you. And I was like, okay, so why would they say that, and what, like, because you're saying the opposite, so I'm just curious
I know,
about that.
it's like my big secret is the opposite. I've heard that too, and I've always been like, I don't believe you. When I look at the results of our ad campaigns versus our boosted post campaigns, it's like unbelievably more effective for us. So I think maybe why they might say that is because most people don't know what they're doing when they're boosting. And when a network says, oh, your post is performing really well, you should boost it for like $7 or some random figure, it's literally a waste of money if you just hit, sure, I want more likes. That's meaningless. Like, you really need to know what. So I guess it's a little bit of like, my workaround here is that when you create a campaign, let's say in Facebook Ads Manager, you can choose organic posts from your page. So if you know which post you want to boost, then you can create the campaign that says, I want to drive website traffic to this page. I want to drive conversions. I want to drive a download. Then you can set the right objective, and Facebook will optimize for a real business conversion and not an engagements only. So boosting directly from the page, it's not always as easy to get to that specific part of the site. So it's a little bit more complex, and not a lot of people think about it maybe that way. But so to some degree, they're right. Like, people who just boost for engagement is a bit, if that's really the only thing you're doing, then that's fine. And if you're like, this is what I want to do, then sure. But yeah, most of the people would have another goal in mind, and you can use your organic content as the ad that shows. So you're boosting it sort of like an ad campaign in a roundabout way. So when I say boosting, another cool way to think about it is there are tools out there where you can set thresholds, and I think Facebook has rules as well, and you can say, if this post hits a certain threshold and my goal is to drive website traffic, it will automatically add it to a campaign and take all of your top performing content that's hit X number of clicks or something, and that has actually been extremely cost effective. So for us, blog and inbound strategy and social work tightly together. A lot of traffic comes from social. We track how that traffic converts, and that's like one of our workarounds too, to find time to make it work. Machine automation is amazing when it works.
And Ava's in the lead with 20 points. Not bad. That's a great point. One thing I'll add to that is that don't just think of boosting in terms of your social media or anything like that. If you get organic, you can boost it. So I know for a fact that sometimes when I've done a story on a company and they like the way it's turned out, they've bought paid traffic to go to that site, to go to Forbes and learn about them because they had a great product launch or they had a great interview or whatever the case might be. I know that's the case. Maybe something else is positive about you somewhere else. You can boost that in different ways as well. So there's lots of opportunities. Who's next? There's a hand way in the back there. Somebody's got to run really fast.
I got it.
Just curious how you guys navigate delegation. So for business owners that are focused on growing their business and not so much about the day-to-day of applying things on social media, as important as it is, and I recognize that, but if you've got one business that's doing well, or maybe multiple businesses running, and you have to spend that time producing that content or releasing that content, how do you navigate delegating that to somebody else within the organization, and getting out of your own way and letting that happen and not have the control on that content. I think that's the struggle for a lot of small business owners.
I'm going to answer the question before I turn it over to whoever wants it here. And I think what's behind that is if I don't measure what I'm doing on my social media, I don't know what the results of it are, I'm not going to prioritize it. And the things that I am currently doing, I know I'm getting certain results for, I'm going to keep doing them. And if I think that social media is or organic channel marketing is a nice to have, not a need to have, then I'm not going to prioritize it, right? So I think that's partly what might be behind your question, but I'm throwing it over to whoever wanted to take it. Looks like Michael was elected.
Sorry, I'll just clarify that. I definitely recognize the value. Once business starts coming in, as a business leader, you're focused on taking that forward and converting. And where we struggle as an organization is that we're constantly putting out content and trying to just feed the machine. At what point you just look elsewhere in your organization and trust that people will follow that message? Is it just you build that strategy and let them go? I mean, for us, we're always twisting and changing the message. So
Cool. Michael?
Yeah, so we're a pretty lean, mean marketing team. There's 6 of us globally. There's 3 here and there's 3 of us in the UK. So we don't have a lot of bandwidth producing a lot of content, but we have to have it. That's what really drives our company and our marketing right now. And so, yes, we do delegate, but we also maintain control. There's one point of control, which is me. Everything that goes on our website or goes out to our social feeds passes through me, and I vet it. And I don't have a whole lot of time, but I do have time to proof things. I look for specific things, which is mainly the tone, that we're fairly consistent in tone, that suddenly something isn't sounding like it's completely out to lunch in regards to the rest of what we published. And I've now identified 4 or 5 people, because the key is you don't have to produce all this yourself. Look around you. We're a company here locally in Vancouver. We have about 65 people. There's some very, very talented, brilliant people, particularly in our product side, our developers, who have never written anything. They don't particularly know how to write articles, but they can certainly give you the information, put it into a draft form, and then you can have somebody just caress that and produce a really good article out of it. And it gives exposure to some of your people who may not be used to that. And then you start to identify certain people in the company that they can generate really good content, and they can do it fairly quickly, and it just needs a little bit of caressing, a little bit of fine-tuning, vet it for SEO and proof it, and then out it goes. So that's how we approach it.
Super smart answer. I would just like to point out there is one of me spread globally, so it's harder for me, but it's all good. Who's next? We got a hand right there in the middle. Awesome. Do we have a mic?
Yes. Where was the hand?
I can run.
Where's the hand?
Oh, it's coming.
Here you go. Get my steps in.
Hi there. So you guys already sort of touched on this, but I'm just wondering about sharing the same content over multiple channels. Like, is that frowned upon? If I'm sharing something to Instagram and then I'm sharing it to Facebook, it's the same thing on my blog, it's the same thing in the e-newsletter, and maybe the same person saw it 4 times and now they're getting super annoyed.
Sean, you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, without being sort of trite, but I'd say, is it appropriate for that channel? Does it make sense? The other thing, technically, is you need to worry about duplicate content. So if you post something on your blog and you put it to LinkedIn, and you can get penalized by Google for stuff like that. But for the most part, think about how that can be contextualized for that channel rather than almost cut down. Yes, get the most out of your asset and break it into smaller pieces that make sense on those channels. But I think, again, it's sort of ask the more strategic question, which is what's the purpose of this piece of content on that channel, and what role is it going to play in the consumer journey?
The role is to have something to post. Did you not know that? It's all good. It's all good. Awesome. Cool. We might have a chance for one more. There is a woman right back there, sort of in the middle. And then I'm going to turn to the panel. And I love what Carolyn had yesterday in her presentation. She had a loot bag at the back end of it, right? I mean, it was a cool picture, first of all. But it was also a cool idea, and I like stealing things. So I'm going to ask each of you, you got 30 seconds because we got a limited time. What's in your loot bag for the audience on organic? So prepare, and here's the question.
Yeah, hi. I just had a question actually about groups, so Facebook groups versus pages. recently I was told that nobody sees the pages anyway, so to put everybody in a group. And I'm totally confused by which way is better or would get more visibility.
Ava, it sounds like a question for you.
That's an interesting one. I feel like I might need to come back to you on that one because I want to ask my team what they think on that. I think I'm trying to think of, because we have our branded company pages and groups. It's more of that community push as well that Facebook, like if we've learned one thing from a lot of the rhetoric or commentary that Facebook has put out, is they're really prioritizing content that matters to people, building more of a community feel, trying to keep people in the platform. And the groups thing is interesting because you can set it up on a few different levels where I think probably the most engaged format is like, oh, it's like a private invite-only group, and you're really controlling the quality of the people that are there, and the page is a lot more open and broadcast, etc. And so the purpose of the two is quite different. We, for example, have a group for ambassadors only, so they can communicate with each other, have a safe space to talk about things. We have our branded page, and that's where we share content for a broad audience. And so it kind of comes back to like, what are you trying to achieve on Facebook, and then which of the two styles of page makes sense, because they'll have slightly different features as well. I think within the groups you can like even have a like mentorship type of function now, which is really cool. But I'd be happy to chat about that with you a little bit more after this, I think, but yeah.
I think that's actually a really smart answer because I've seen it from companies. StreamYard is one example where they have a user group for all people who are customers, and it is a private group. You get invited to it. In fact, it's so private that they have to say yes before something you post actually goes live in there. And it works really well. There's huge engagement there, way more than I think their page would get. That said, it's for existing customers and users, not necessarily new ones. So I think there's different purposes and uses there. Looks like you want to say something. Is this your loot bag or is this your answer?
No, I got a loot bag thing, but I want to answer this orthogonally. Do I get points for using that word? So 80%.
10.
Damn it. It's super pretentious. 80% of the world consumes content. It's like 18 engages or participates, and 2% post or something like that. So think about groups as an area that you can listen and consume. You don't have to engage or post because that can help inform what you do on your regular channel, not on the group. And so you don't need to go be posting content on every channel. Like with Medium, we don't go and post content Medium, but we read and we highlight. And someone's like, oh, quietly highlighted my... You don't have to always post. So you can go into the group and just listen, or you can participate, but you don't have to create. And so I guess my orthogonal comment to that is groups are great because there's a real community there. It's a bit of a honeypot, and just use that to gather insight.
Awesome. Let's pass it
points,
down. Right? Let's pass it down to Carly, and you each have 30 seconds for your loot bag.
The timer is running. Okay.
The timer is running.
Okay.
Now.
Well, one thing we touched on earlier about the idea of everyone being experts, and that idea of putting content on there to showcase what you feel you know best. I think it's key to live your brand. As far as, and take action on it. So for instance, with use.ca, our mission is to keep stuff out of the landfill. So perfect example, everything in that Chill and Charge lounge over there was sourced off of use.ca. So we're showcasing what we believe in, and then we're proving that through action. And I think that resonates with your customers, with your clients, the authenticity of you're living your brand.
So my garage is basically use.ca warehouse, I guess. So there we go. Awesome. Michael, 30 seconds, loot bag.
I think the key, we've talked about data a lot in the last 2 days. Measuring everything. The great thing about digital marketing is everything is measurable. It's not like putting an ad in a newspaper and guessing how many people came into your store. Everything is measurable online. And there are tools that are out there that even the smallest business can make use of. There's a lot of free tools to measure almost anything, including organic search, which has become, Google has made that very difficult to really know what's going on organically. But there are other tools like Moz, SEMrush, and other tools that Google has that are somewhat hidden, like Search Console. If you've never been to it, good luck finding it. It used to be called Webmaster Tools. They changed it and they hid it a little more. It was in my mind, I had an article up a long time ago about all the free tools that are available. I'm going to rewrite that, update it, and put it onto the Maximizer blog. Watch for that in the next week to 10 days. Because there's a world of tools you can be using for free, and you just need to know where they are, make use of them, and then grow your data knowledge.
Awesome. Ava.
I'd say the one thing is just be really clear on what your goals are. Like, what are you trying to achieve? And then that will inform what data matters to you, what measurement framework you need, what channels it applies to. And then if you're not clear on your goals, it's really hard to know if you're being successful because you don't know what you're trying to measure or what success looks like. So that would be my main takeaway. And also come to my talk at 11.
Awesome. Ooh, nice plug. Wow. Sean.
Rich snippets. If there's one thing that all of you need to go back to your desk and like Google is rich snippets, which is an aspect of Google's developer tool or console developer kit. I'll talk about it in T-minus 5 minutes in my presentation as well, but it's like every one of your businesses, all of your roles can benefit from rich snippets. Go Google it.
Interesting. Thank you so much for your time, panel. Thank you so much for your expertise. Really appreciate it. Remember, who's the expert? Can you say I? Does I exist? Is the I there? Who's the expert? So exciting, so out there, so loud, so proud. Who's the expert? Thank you.